Bitcoin now is the exciting investment. Nvidia's earnings came in and they were better than expected as revenue increased 94%, almost doubled, but we're used to it being over 100%. So it was kind of anticlimactic, and the stock went down just a little bit, but it mostly held on. And I think it's going into a more stable phase. Some have suggested that Jensen Huang is now trying to engineer a softer landing for our expectations of Nvidia. This is a long way of saying the big money and the fast money has already been made in Nvidia. I was putting like $1 million on Nvidia earlier in the year, and boy, did it ever pay off. The same with Supermicro. Those two, I was really playing those, and now Supermicro is in trouble, and Nvidia is stabilizing. You know, its size, it's over 3.5 trillion. Its size, it's going to be harder for it to do that kind of fast growth like it was doing. It's unlikely to be replicated. So the new exciting, it's not new, it's been around since 2017, but Bitcoin just recently hit 94,000 and looks like a sure bet to hit 100,000. And everything is lining up for it. We got a president that supports crypto. It's just being accepted more and more. And I think third world countries could adopt it that don't have good currencies. And I think people like me are buying it. I was a crypto skeptic, and now I'm buying Bitcoin. I bought $200,000 worth of Bitcoin, 75% through Fidelity's Bitcoin ETF, and 25% through Microstrategy, symbol MSTR, which is a whole nother world. And Michael Saylor is doing very complicated things with it that I don't totally understand yet, but I will come to understand. And I think it's moving and it's doing what you want an exciting stock to do. Don't get me wrong, Nvidia isn't done. It'll continue to make 20-30% a year, but call me spoiled. Right now, I got a lot of small stocks that are making 20 to 30% in a month. So the long road of holding on and waiting for something to come across the line, I'm gotten to be a short-term trader just because it's so much more profitable for me. And you have to find out for yourself if this is the kind of thing for you, but it can be very profitable if you follow some guidelines. And maybe I should do a video where I point out some of my kind of rules for short-term trading. Now, I will go long-term on a short basis, and by that, that means a couple of weeks, okay, in that world. And I put a stop loss on these when I can, and I trade towards the top because that's where the action is. When you got a stock that's going towards new tops, you got very high demand for it, okay? You want to make sure you got a parachute, but that's where I've made the money. Bottom fishing has never been my thing. Here's Michael Saylor, the head of Microstrategy, describing his investment, and I think he's a genius.
Joining us now in an exclusive interview is Michael Saylor, co-founder and executive chairman at Microstrategy. He is joining us from the Cantor Crypto, Digital Assets, and AI Infrastructure Conference in Miami. Michael, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for hosting me, Morgan.
So I'm going to start right there. The torrid run we've seen in Bitcoin, is this all just anticipation about what a Trump administration is going to mean for it?
The red wave is probably the biggest thing that's happened in the past 4 years for Bitcoin. It's incredibly auspicious for Bitcoin and for the entire crypto industry. But we're also getting a lot of very constructive support from Wall Street. BlackRock has been a very, very strong voice articulating the Bitcoin value proposition. And of course, Microstrategy on October 30th announced that we were going to raise $42 billion to buy Bitcoin. And that's the same as saying we're going to buy every Bitcoin mine for the next 3 years at $85,000 or more Bitcoin. So there's a lot of bullish things going on in the market right now.
And I do want to get to that audacious $42 billion fundraising plan of yours. But first, there's a lot of regulation and regulatory aspects that are in focus with the Trump administration coming into play. SEC chairman, for example, a lot of expectations that Gary Gensler is going to step aside. And I realize Bitcoin itself is governed as a commodity, unlike other cryptocurrencies. But when you're talking about the ETFs and when you're talking about the cryptocurrency exchanges and when you're talking about companies like yours, MicroStrategy, which is publicly traded, it is SEC. So how important is that appointment going to be? And who would you like to see at the helm?
Well, I think whoever chairs the SEC has probably the most pivotal role in the entire digital assets industry. I think this is incredibly bullish for digital assets. It's very good for the crypto industry. We're going to see a lot more pro-Bitcoin policies. We're going to see a digital assets framework. We're going to see an end to the war on crypto. We're going to see a lot of pro-business policies. And I think that clearly the SEC will be a big part of it. So it's above my pay grade to have an opinion on who it's going to be. But I think it's pretty clear the House, the Senate, the White House, they're all very pro-crypto. So I expect that we'll have a very supportive head of the SEC.
Michael, well, as well as you've done buying Bitcoin, I'm not sure anything is really above your pay grade at this point, which leads you to the question, what do you think is the biggest threat to Bitcoin's price staying above 60K? What potentially causes another dive below 30K?
I don't think it's going to 60K. It's not going to 30K. I think it's going to go up from here. I'm planning the 100K party. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be New Year's Eve at my house. So I would be surprised if we don't go through 100K in November or December.
So then what's the biggest threat to it going lower, even if it doesn't get that low?
I think the biggest uncertainty in the industry was November 5th. And would you have a blue wave? Would you have a red wave? Or would you have a split Congress? And would you have any dispute about the future of crypto assets and Bitcoin? I think that was settled by the people very decidedly on November 5th. And I don't really see any threats in the near-term horizon.
A strategic Bitcoin reserve, how likely is it that that is actually established? And why would that be a good thing when you're talking about a decentralized asset now being stockpiled by a centralized government?
Well, that's being sponsored by Senator Lummis from Wyoming, and she understands the value of the frontier. The United States was built by purchasing Manhattan, then we purchased the Louisiana Territory, then we purchased California and acquired Texas, and then we bought Alaska. The next great frontier is cyberspace, and the obvious thing to do is to own cyberspace, buy the future. And so I think it's a great idea. I think it will happen. And I think it's important to the United States because it cements the United States' control over the future world reserve capital network. Senator Lummis's bill will offset $16 trillion of our debt, according to my models right now. So I think it's economically wise, it's technically wise. And again, Bitcoin is manifest destiny for the United States.
Next is an interview of Jan van Eck, who's the head of Van Eck ETFs. They were one of the first to get a Bitcoin ETF approved, and he gives some very enlightening statements about the current status of Bitcoin.
The interesting thing about Bitcoin is that its supply is fixed. There's 21 million. Where are we now in terms of the mining? 19 yet?
Yeah, you're close to almost, approaching 90%, right? Michael Saylor yesterday said the next halvenings, right, which don't even matter because you're already so much of it's out there in supply. I thought that was interesting.
Do you think this is an important national industry? Is it even a national industry? I mean, do we need a strategic reserve of Bitcoin?
Well, there's been a lot of chatter about that. I'll tell you, listen, I think the big elephant in the room is that U.S. fiscal policy is unbelievably unsustainable. If we continue at this rate, every other country that's been doing this stuff has gone bankrupt. And so I think Bitcoin...
Debt to GDP, you mean?
Debt to GDP, fiscal deficit as a percent of GDP. I mean, it's crazy. We're setting records when we have full employment. So under Trump 2.0, fiscal policy is going to be very different than 1.0, right? And so here are the two scenarios. One is no cuts. We're not going to have tax cuts anyway, right? So no cuts in spending, or we cut what Vivek is talking about, which is $500 billion, $500 billion in spending. That would be, slow down the economy, right? Whenever you cut government spending, that's not good. It would have to be offset with deregulation, maybe lower interest rates, wink, wink from the Fed, things like that. So it's just going to be a very different policy dynamic. And frankly, I think there's going to put a little uncertainty into the markets going into the new year.
I think that's a great warning point for what's been a lot of ebullience around you. Do you take the movements in gold as a bit of is telling us something? In other words, the moment Trump got elected, gold started to sell off. And I kind of read gold as a proxy for dollar devaluation. And I know there's a lot of different theories on this, but gold had really ramped up this year. And it seems to me that's in large part as it's sort of saying your dollar goes less far than it used to. If Bitcoin is a digital version of that, then despite the excitement over what's going to happen on the regulatory front, if the dollar is now strengthening in real terms because we are going to make changes that you're mentioning, could it turn out to be more of a headwind for Bitcoin under the Trump administration?
I 100% agree with you. And I think everyone before the election was sort of saying both candidates are bad for spending, right? And that was driving this bull market in gold all-time highs on a regular basis. And I think, they haven't been focusing on Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Who are saying, no, we're going to be serious about cutting spending. No one mentioned that during the election,
Totally. Yeah.
Right? But suddenly, suddenly on the acceptance speech, he's talking all about Elon, and I call it the Trump-Musk, administration. So it's seriously on the table.
But Congress controls spending. It's not the White House.
Yes. 100%. And I think the Senate will be a dampener, which is why I don't think Trump's going to get a lot of tax cuts. Maybe they won't tax wages or something not so financially significant like that, but symbolically important. So,
quick question, if I might. What is the catalyst or the main driver that takes it from, we've just seen it go up 35% in 3 weeks, Bitcoin, to 93,000 or whatever it is right at this moment. What is the catalyst that takes it to 400,000 by the end of the decade?
It's just additional buyers, right? So right now, even this year...
Just acceptance.
Yeah, this year, it's really been individual investors that have been buying the Bitcoin ETFs. I mean, there are some institutions, but really, in talking to them, everyone has been very shy to talk about crypto before the election. Now, that's changed a little bit. But we still don't have wealth management firms approving this or allocating to it in any manner. Institutions haven't barely been changing.
And you see that changing so that they become bigger players.
Absolutely.
In here. Do you have a Bitcoin ETF?
First to file in 2017, and yes, we do.
Like I said, Nvidia didn't have bad earnings. It just wasn't up to snuff for the previous reports. They want to see Nvidia expand. When you're going over 100% or near 100%, it gets really tough to do that. Nvidia nearly doubles revenue on strong AI demand. Nvidia reported third quarter earnings that beat expectations for sales and earnings while delivering a better than expected forecast for the current quarter. Revenue continues to surge at Nvidia, rising 94% on an annual basis during the quarter that ended on October 27th. Many of Nvidia's end customers, such as Microsoft, Oracle, and OpenAI, have started receiving the company's next-generation AI chip called Blackwell. Their earnings per share were 81 cents adjusted versus 75 cents expected. Revenue was $35.08 billion versus $33.16 billion expected. Nvidia said it expects about $37.5 billion, plus or minus 2% in the current quarter sales, versus $37.08 billion expected by analysts polled by LSEG. So they beat both on earnings and revenue. It's a good report. It's not a knock it out of the park report for Nvidia. They're being judged by their past behavior, and the expectations have just gotten out of this world. And this report isn't out of this world. It's just super excellent. This chart shows how some Bitcoin stocks have done in comparison to Nvidia. Nvidia has made 194% year to date, while Microstrategy, you can see why there's such a big fuss over Saylor and Microstrategy, has made 650%. They say it's almost like having a call option and buying Microstrategy. So it has to do with bonds and all sorts of things. He's got it arranged in such a way that it magnifies the impact of Bitcoin going up. And Fidelity Bitcoin Fund, FBTC, has only made a little over 100% since the beginning of the year. So this is the world I live in right now, and I'm going with the highest gainers, and I think Nvidia still has room to run, and I'm going to continue to trade the Qs. Of course, being a trader, I'm going to use the triple leverage version, the TQQQ, which has worked excellent for me. I grab a couple thousand a day and get out. So thanks for listening.